So, my most requested Pokemon as of late has been Type Null, and really I can see why a lot of people may not know how to use this Pokemon to its fullest potential, because its stats are so even other than its speed, its typing is very basic, and its move pool is kind of strange. So hopefully I'll be able to clear up some things, and honestly any set other than the first one I show you all will probably be viable. So, looking at its stats, it's base 95 in everything, which means it's just slightly worse than a lot of the event legendaries that are base 100 in all stats. But it also has 59 base speed, which is honestly a bit unfortunate because there are so many Pokemon with 60, 65, and 70 base speed this generation that having that 59 just puts it a very small step below the rest. It's a normal type, which means it's only weak to fighting, it only resists ghost, it's only immune to ghost, and it takes neutral damage from every other type. So really nothing too special there. And its only ability is battle armor, which makes me think in certain situations it could be a better wall than Porygon 2. Although it does lack reliable recovery, battle armor means that it cannot be hit by a critical hit at any time, which is very useful. But we'll go ahead. The first set I have is just something I thought was funny. I was poking around with the different Z moves, and I thought this would be a very interesting set to run. So on this Type Null, you would run a Z Crystal, either Psychium or Steelium Z. You would run the Modest Nature, max out your special attack, give yourself a lot of health, and then put a little bit into speed. I put 8 here, but you could also run 12, and that way you would actually outspeed any Pokemon that is base 60 with no investment at all. So really it's up to you on what you'd prefer to give up in terms of possibly outspeeding your opponents. And your main move is going to be either Z Heal Block or Z Metal Sound, and those are two moves you never see in the competitive scene, and that's the reason I like this idea so much, because they both boost your special attack, and that's why I call this set the Z Specs set. So, in my opinion, Heal Block is much better because even though it's a lot less useful in competitive play because all it does is stop your opponent from using healing moves and for their leftovers from activating. And it may work with grassy terrain as well, but that's about all it does. It's really not useful enough to take up a whole move spot on its own. But if you decide to use it with a Z Crystal, it's the same as a Nasty Plot. You get a +2 boost to your special attack. Now, if you'd prefer to run something that's more useful after using up the Z Crystal, then you can also run Metal Sound. It only gives you a +1 special attack boost, but it also reduces your opponent's special defense by 2, which means you can hit whatever you switch in on and try to set up on much harder, as long as they don't switch out, but you could also force the switch with that. In my opinion, Heal Block is the better choice. From there, it's really about coverage, and unfortunately Type Null gets no special coverage. Your main two moves will be Tri-Attack for your big stab, and Air Slash for your flying type coverage, and past this, you don't get anything other than Hidden Power. He gets things like Round, which is worse in almost every way than Tri-Attack, and those other normal type attacks that are weaker than Tri-Attack. But the only other move that's useful is Hidden Power, and because of this, you probably want to run either Hidden Power Ground or Fighting, just so that you can hit most of the Steel and Rock types that would normally wall you if you were running only normal and Flying types attacks. It really is up to you on which one of these you'd want to run. There are some key Pokemon that will be immune to your attacks if you run one or the other. So if you run Hidden Power Ground, Pokemon like Celesteela and Skarmory will completely wall you for days. You will not be able to do damage to these at all. And if you decide to run Hidden Power Fighting, then you have no chance against Aegislash or Doublade, which since Aegislash has recently been banned, maybe that's not so much of a problem anymore. But I'm just sad that all of this Pokemon special coverage doesn't come along until it evolves, so if you really wanted a specially offensive base 95 Pokemon, you may just want to use Silvally instead. The next set I have is much more of a bulky set. This is what I call the new Poori 2 set. And it is a Type Null with either Eviolite or Leftovers. I strongly recommend Eviolite, but if you really want to run Leftovers and have that recovery, be my guest. But you really need that additional bulk. Impish Nature, and you'll max out your HP and your defense. That way you have a split defense. You have all your investment in your special defense, but you also run an Impish Nature to boost your physical defense. That way you can take hits decently well on both sides. If you already had a dedicated wall on one side or the other, you could always switch this Pokemon to be either fully physically or fully specially defensive. And the funny thing about Top Knoll is he actually is about the same defensively as Porygon 2. He just lacks a bit offensively because he doesn't have quite the special attack that Porygon 2 does, and he's actually just a tiny bit slower than P2. And for moves, I kind of got some inspiration from a friend on this, but running Substitute on Top Knoll seems to be very effective because your opponent wants to switch out and stick a status on you, because that's something they commonly do on Porygons. If they see that you're running Eviolite and see that you're trying to be bulky, the first thing they're going to want to do is either burn you to completely nullify your offensive presence, or they're going to want to Toxic you so they don't even have to worry about damaging you over and over. They can just let it slowly whittle you away. So if you're able to get a Substitute up on either their switch in or a weak hit, then that puts you in a very favorable position. You can also run Toxic or Thunder Wave. Toxic's good for wearing down your opponent since you won't have much damage output because of your no investment in attack, and Thunder Wave for speed control, although I highly recommend Toxic. From there, run Return or Frustration depending on what you prefer for your main stab. It's pretty much the strongest move you can get, and then for your last move you can run either some kind of coverage or you could run Rest. And the good thing about this set is you could also replace Substitute with Sleep Talk, and then you would just have something that Toxics and returns or does decent damage to anything that switches in, and you can rest off any statuses and damage, and then you're really only walled by Pokemon like Gengar. If you'd rather run coverage than rest though, you do have a few options in Flame Charge, which would boost your speed, but it's really not that strong on its own. You have Rock Slide and Iron Head, which would flinch if you were faster, but you're more than likely not outspeeding your opponent unless they're running a very slow team. You also have Shadow Claw and X-Scissor if you need the coverage from either Ghost or Bug-type moves, which really isn't as common if they're not stab. Now, the final set I have is the Physical Sweeper. This is much more likely the sweeper you'd like to run, and there are two different variants of this. I'll go over the one I think is more viable first, and that's one carrying an Eviolite, obviously, so you have the bulk, and then you're able to set up Adamant Nature, max out your attack, and I just did the 12 speed and 244 HP trick here that I normally do, and that just means, like I said earlier, that you outspeed base 60 speed Pokemon that have no investment. Your main setup move will be Swords Dance, then you need Return for your main stab, you can run Iron Head, Rock Slide, or any of the other coverage we've already talked about. Now, other moves you could run would be Double Edge, which is actually stronger than Return, but you do take damage when you use it. You take a lot of recoil, and if you're trying to be bulky, especially if you're slower, then that's kind of counterproductive. You can also run Facade if you really fear a burn, because then you get much stronger. It actually becomes stronger than Double Edge if you get a burn or Toxic or even Paralyzed. He also gets U-Turn, but I really don't think this Pokemon is really meant for pivoting. I think that's more of Silvalley's role. And the other set I really had for this Pokemon, I didn't put on screen, I just kind of shared the moves on this screen, is a Normalium Z. You keep the Swords Dance, you keep your normal stab, probably Double Edge in this case, you could also run Return, and then you would run Flame Charge, but you'd have a Jolly max speed, max attack Silvally, or Top Knoll instead, and then with the Flame Charges, if you're max speed, then you'll actually be outspeeding things shortly. So if you get a Flame Charge or two up, and that Swords Dance, then suddenly you're at +2 speed, +2 attack, and you're doing a lot of damage to your opponent. Now, for your last move, you could always run the coverage, you could run Rock Slide, you could run Iron Head, you could run anything you really wanted on there, but I think Z Giga Impact would be a great choice, because Giga Impact, as you may or may not know, is the physical variant of Hyper Beam. 150 base power, it's a physical normal move, and almost no one runs it outside of like Slacking because it requires you to recharge the next turn. You're completely unusable for a full turn, which means it's normally not worth the extra power. But if you decide to run a Z Crystal and you use it, it loses that secondary effect, and it's as strong as a Z move can get. It is almost, if not 200 base power before stab and before your sword stance. That is ridiculously strong, even if you're only base 95 attack. So I really think that would be a good way to blow away that one wall standing between you and a successful top Null sweep.